I used to believe marriage meant companionship, that no matter how hard life got, there would always be someone reaching for your hand in the dark. But somewhere along the way, my husband stopped reaching. His name is Rohan. To everyone else, he was the perfect man, charming, hardworking, reliable. We had been married for 6 years, and on the surface, everything looked fine. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, had respectable jobs, and even hosted dinner parties that made it seem like we were the kind of couple others envied. But inside, those 4 walls, I was slowly disappearing. It started with little things. He would come home late, mumbling something about deadlines. I'd cook his favorite meals, wear his favorite dress, even try initiating intimacy. He'd smile politely, then lock himself in the study or the bathroom. I thought maybe he was tired, stressed, overwhelmed, but stress doesn't last for years, and silence doesn't replace affection unless something is broken. I began to notice a pattern. Every night, like clockwork, Rohan would retreat into the bathroom for long periods. At first, I ignored it. Then I became curious. Eventually, I realized the truth. He was pleasuring himself in secret, choosing solitude over me. When I confronted him gently, hoping for honesty, he brushed it off. "It's nothing," he said, without looking me in the eye. "I'm just not in the mood lately." But lately stretched into months, then a year. I tried everything. Planned a weekend getaway, bought new lingerie, even suggested therapy. But he always had excuses. "Work is too hectic. Maybe next month. Don't overthink it." I stopped bringing it up eventually, not because it stopped hurting, but because his indifference stung more than rejection. Still, I didn't hate him. I just felt abandoned. It wasn't about sex. It was about closeness, about feeling seen, desired, loved. I missed his touch, his attention, the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. Now I could be standing right in front of him and still feel invisible. One afternoon, as I stood on our balcony watering the plants, I caught the eye of our neighbor, Arjun. He waved with a warm smile, the kind that didn't ask anything of me, just offered presents. I smiled back, out of politeness at first. But later that night, as Rohan retreated once again into silence, I thought about that brief moment. How seen I had felt in those 2 seconds, more than in the last 6 months at home. It was nothing. Or so I told myself. But sometimes, the smallest cracks in a wall let in the brightest light, or the darkest shadows. Arjun lived alone in the flat next to ours. He'd moved in a few months earlier after a quiet divorce, though I didn't know the details. What I did know was that he always greeted people with a calm, thoughtful smile and spoke in a voice that made you feel heard. At first, we exchanged only brief greetings in the hallway or on the stairs, casual, forgettable. But as my own home grew quieter, I found myself noticing him more. One day, as I struggled with a bag of groceries outside the gate, Arjun appeared beside me. "Here, let me help," he offered, taking the heavy bag without waiting for permission. I expected him to simply hand it over and leave, but instead, he walked with me to my door, chatting along the way about the weather and a new cafe opening nearby. It was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks that didn't end in silence. From then on, our interactions became more frequent. A wave became a hello. A hello became a question about my day, and soon, we were standing in the corridor talking for 20 minutes without realizing it. There was something unforced about his presence. He didn't pry, didn't flirt, didn't act as if I was a woman to be rescued or pursued. He simply listened. One evening, when Rohan was late again, I found myself lingering near the front gate. Longer than usual, Arjun noticed. "Rough day?" he asked. I nodded. He didn't press, just stood beside me quietly. The silence between us felt less empty than the one in my marriage. Eventually, our conversations deepened. We talked about books, music, memories of childhood. He told me about his failed marriage, how things had eroded slowly, the way silence can be louder than any fight. His words echoed in my chest. It felt like he was describing my life without even knowing it. I never meant for anything to shift, but something had. I started looking forward to seeing him. I'd catch myself checking the balcony to see if he was out watering his plants or sitting with his morning coffee. I wore a little lipstick before taking the trash out, something I hadn't done in ages. It was subtle, this change. There were no stolen touches, no lingering gazes yet, but emotionally, I was already leaning. I knew it. And a part of me, one I tried to silence, wondered if he knew it too. One afternoon, he said almost in passing, "You deserve to smile more often. It suits you." It caught me off guard. No one had said something like that to me in years. And somehow it felt more intimate than anything Rohan had said in months. I thanked him with a smile I didn't recognize. Half gratitude, half confusion. That night, I lay awake next to a husband who never turned to me, and I kept hearing Arjun's voice. "You deserve to smile." It happened on a Wednesday. Cloudy skies, gentle rain, and that familiar emptiness echoing through our apartment. Rohan had messaged me an hour before dinner. "Caught up with work. Eat without me." No apology, no warmth, just words on a screen. I stared at my phone, numb. Then, almost without thinking, I grabbed my umbrella and stepped out. Arjun's lights were on. I hesitated outside his door, unsure why I was even there. Before I could knock, it opened. He stood there, surprised but not unkind. "Bad day?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I just needed some air. I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." His place smelled faintly of coffee and sandalwood. It was warm, inviting, nothing extravagant, but lived in, real. We sat on the couch, a muted jazz track playing in the background. He handed me a cup of tea without asking. Somehow, he always knew exactly what I needed. "I feel invisible," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Like I don't exist anymore." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're not invisible," he said. "You're just with someone who forgot how to see you." Something in me cracked. I tried to blink away the tears, but they came, anyway. And before I knew it, I was crying, not because of Rohan's neglect, but because someone had finally acknowledged it. Arjun moved closer, hesitating only slightly before placing a gentle hand on mine. I didn't pull away. In that silence, our closeness became something else, something neither of us dared define but both of us felt. His hand was warm, steady. I hadn't realized how much I missed the simple act of being touched with care. When he leaned forward and held me, it wasn't desperate or impulsive. It was quiet, deliberate, human. I rested my head on his shoulder, and for a few seconds, the ache in my chest softened. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. "You're just hurting," he replied. "So am I." The embrace lingered, and though we said no more, everything had already shifted. The line had been crossed, not with passion, but with presence, and that, in its own way, felt even more dangerous. I didn't stay long. When I returned home, Rohan was asleep on the couch, television still on. He hadn't noticed I was gone. I watched him for a moment, his face blank, unaware, and all I could think was how little it hurt now to see him this way. The next day, I went to Arjun's again, not for comfort, not for escape, but because somewhere deep inside, I had started to believe that I deserved more than just being tolerated. Days turned into weeks, and what began as quiet moments of comfort between Arjun and me evolved into something deeper, something that no longer hid behind excuses. I told myself it wasn't an affair. It was refuge, a space where I could breathe again. But deep down, I knew that every time I stepped across that hallway, I was walking further from the life I had once built. With Arjun, I wasn't invisible. He remembered how I took my tea, asked about my dreams, and held me like I mattered. It wasn't wild or reckless. It was tender. It was real. But it was also wrong. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself each time I looked at Rohan across the dinner table and saw nothing but a stranger lost in his own world. Ironically, it wasn't guilt that finally caught up with me. It was clarity. One morning, I woke to find Rohan scrolling mindlessly through his phone, still beside me but never really with me. I watched him for a long moment, realizing that the distance between us hadn't formed overnight. It had grown inch by inch through years of silence, avoidance, and unspoken needs. We had both stopped trying. I just happened to be the one who found warmth elsewhere. That evening, I asked Rohan to sit with me. He looked confused, even wary. Is something wrong? Yes, I said plainly. Something's been wrong for a long time. For the first time in months, we talked, really talked. I told him how I felt unseen, unwanted, like a ghost in my own marriage. He didn't argue. He just sat there, shoulders slumped, staring at the floor. I know I've been distant, he finally admitted. I didn't know how to fix it, so I stopped trying. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise. It was a confession, the kind that comes too late to save anything. I didn't mention Arjun. There was no point. That part of my story wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. In the weeks that followed, I moved out, quietly, without drama. Rohan didn't beg or protest. I think a part of him knew it was already over. As for Arjun, he remained by my side, not as a secret, but as someone who reminded me that love isn't just about vows or longevity. It's about being seen, heard, and chosen every single day. I don't glorify what I did. I don't pretend it was perfect. But I do know this. Desire is not shameful, and loneliness can break even the strongest hearts if left unchecked. Sometimes the real betrayal isn't crossing a line. It's letting someone fade so far into silence that they no longer remember the sound of their own voice. And I chose to find mine again.